¿Qué onda, Mina? Welcome back to Mons. So my name is Hisarakaran, and I recently read One Piece all the way up until the end of Alabasta. I decided to finally read One Piece for multiple reasons. Number one, it's always been on my bucket list. I watched One Piece in Toonami and Maguzi, if anyone remembers that. I watched it a lot as a kid. I want to say all the way up until the Bartier. And then fast forward to about how long has it been now? 3 years, maybe two. The live action of One Piece came out, and that got me really interested because I thought it was well done. Again, I never really had a huge interest in watching One Piece. I was always kind of more of a Naruto kid. But after that live action, I got a little more interested in checking out One Piece, but I wasn't quite there yet. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a channel called Melon Tea. Check her out, please. She makes amazing videos. It made me realize that there's actually more sauce to One Piece than I initially thought, especially since I really didn't make it that far into One Piece. So why am I making this video if there's already way better videos out there that cover One Piece? Honestly, I'm just kind of here to archive my thoughts. I've already kind of forgotten my real first impression of Romance Dawn. This impression is really now kind of a reflection at this point, just because I've already finished Alabasta. But that makes it all the more important of why I want to kind of archive it and maybe see if you, person that's somehow stumbled upon this video, resonated with this thoughts I'm about to have. I don't know, or you can make fun of me, whatever. So Romance Dawn is a pretty short arc. It's technically only chapters 1 through 7, which is um the first volume minus one chapter. But I'm just gonna cover this whole first volume, chapter 1 through 8 altogether. So one of the very first things I noticed while reading through the first chapter was I can really feel young Oda, the author of the series. He's very excited to show off this world. I can go on about whimsy and everything, but I think that's something that is better for you, the audience, to experience than me just to tell you about it. So you can, if you really want to feel that whimsy, just read the first like chapter or two, and you'll know what I'm talking about. What I can talk a little more in depth about is how the Shank flashbacks immediately shows what it actually means to be a pirate, which is kind of like a sense of freedom and the differences between a good and a bad pirate. You get like a mountain bandit that tries to kind of irritate Shanks and some of the townsfolk, the civilians such as Luffy and the lady at the bar. And already One Piece is showing that this is a bad pirate, but Shanks, implicitly at least in this chapter, is a good pirate. As the volume goes on, other factions are quickly highlighted as well. It shows off bad Marines, plenty of bad Marines, and eventually good Marines, implicitly Kobe being one, but also kind of the other ones that salute Luffy out of the way, as well as some other minor factions that will eventually be reflected in the next chapter, such as sea monsters and how civilians get caught up between Marines and pirates, even if they're good or bad. And I think this has always kind of been, and will be, One Piece's kind of bread and butter, is like how people in between always kind of end up getting caught up. Okay, so besides just the implicit stuff, let's talk about something a little more explicit, which is the characters. So each character has a very strong personality that is very different from one another. Like Luffy is kind of the goofy one, Kobe is the scared one, Zoro is the cool one, the Captain Morgan's the evil one, Shanks is the very chilled out one. Like you get a lot of ranges of personality here. And once again, I think that kind of just has to do with how excited Oda is to show off his characters because they give them kind of very strong moments. So I've heard this Zoro line of like telling Luffy like, "Come closer." I bet you wouldn't. Like it's kind of a weird thing for Zoro to say in the grand scheme of things, because he's always kind of not really cared about getting like asking for help and being this, I guess, provoking towards someone. And I think this is a testament to maybe Oda doesn't quite understand his characters just yet, especially Zoro since he wasn't in the version 1 of his manga of One Piece. So Zoro is a relatively new character in his head. But additionally, it's because I think Oda was just too excited to show off the personality of Zoro and kind of wanted to make him cool but scary, which is kind of is how Zoro is perceived in the grand world of One Piece. But that's besides the point. I don't want to harp too much on on these characters. Because again, I do think Oda gets better, so there's and it serves its purpose at introducing Zoro's character. So whatever. So I just want to reiterate that I am a Naruto fan, and the way Naruto likes to world build its like areas is by using repetition and familiarity. There's kind of a slight mundanity to Naruto's worlds, but you constantly see them over and over again, which kind of gives you a sense of this place is real. Now, One Piece is a little different, especially with hindsight. And that's that Luffy rarely, or we the audience rarely ever get to see or go back to these locations. So its world building is not focused on one area and using it over and over again. It's about jumping from place to place and mapping out the world. So I like to call this form of world building kind of Disney world building. Oh geez. Disney world building? No, that doesn't sound good. Disney castle entrance world building. Whatever. Theme park world building. Let's call it that. So the marine base here has two massive buildings that look like a power plant. And nothing else in One Piece quite looks like this. And really in a lot of fictional stuff, this will kind of stand out in its own right. Now within the town, there's not really that much distinguishing it. Except maybe the execution ground, but it's this marine base itself that looks like a power plant that really makes this location stand out and gives it an identity. If we flash back a little further back to Alvida's ship, well, Alvida's flag is the iconic thing. Nothing else really looks like Alvida's flag. And that's how we remember that location. And yeah, even Naruto kind of has that a little bit with its Naruto Mount Rushmore. I feel One Piece does it way more often and will do it more often. Now, the thing about these landmarks is that very often you'll see them at the very beginning of going into a new island. And this is why I kind of compared them to a Disney World entrance. So you think about like the Disney World castle, where the very first impression is immediately memorable and iconic. It's why you see it in movies all the time. Like this castle is its own identity within Disney. And it's kind of what I feel is Oda's kind of strength when it comes to making the readers and the viewers remember their locales and world build and all that. And something that I think One Piece also does pretty well, especially in its first volume, because at the end of the day, this was the very first volume of a Shonen Jump manga, which means it is going to sink or swim, depending if this gives a strong impression on the Shonen Jump readers at the time. And his strategy, and Oda's strategy with this was it gave you so many questions off the top that viewers, even if they didn't like One Piece that much, wanted to know these answers. So he just kind of bombarded you with a bunch of questions, such as, what's up with Goldie Roger? Who and where is Shanks? What's a devil fruit? Is that it for Kobe after just seeing him off like that? What is Zoro's full backstory? Who is the Nami girl at the very end? What's the One Piece? The one thing that's been keeping this entire series going for 20 plus years now. Even though this type of storytelling isn't always effective for a chapter 1, it's usually it's a really good way to hooking your audience. And I feel that's another thing that Oda is decent at. And once again, I want to compare Naruto because they're kind of like, there's like a rivalry between them, and there's a lot of similarities of them being Shonen Jump that came around the same time, being part of the big three, essentially. So Naruto kind of hooked you in by the world and the characters and Naruto's dream alone. It didn't really need to entice you with a lot of mysteries. One Piece, like, I don't find Luffy's dream of being the Pirate King to be that enchanting in the beginning because we don't really know what a Pirate King actually means at this point. So that part kind of doesn't really mean anything in Romance Dawn. But unlike Naruto, is that it gives you all these questions to immediately hook the audience into wanting to keep reading One Piece. And maybe it won't be enough to keep you going for 3,000 volumes or whatever, however long One Piece will end up being, right? But like, it's probably will be enough to keep a Shonen Jump audience coming back a couple times. And I feel that's how One Piece actually ended up succeeding is because it kept these questions, these really big questions, lingering on for such a long time. That being said, I've always kind of had one complaint with One Piece, even in this manga form, and that's that One Piece is kind of slow with its beginnings. Sometimes that's for the best, but more often than not, I find Oda takes a while to really get that spark going. Like his stories, I think Oda gets better at making beginnings. But here at the very beginning of all beginnings, he doesn't quite know how to introduce so many ideas at once. But there's a reason why One Piece is successful, and that's because Oda, on the opposite end, his endings are always amazing, or usually amazing. I mean, I think they're always amazing. So by the end of Romance Dawn here, it's kind of nice seeing Kobe receive some closure, the Marines receiving some closure, the island receiving some closure, and kind of now seeing how Zoro and Luffy move on with their journey. Now I gotta say, um, some other minor things I also want to bring up here because I kind of have a checklist here. Sorry if it's a little bit scattered, but this is my first time doing something like a review like this, so bear with me. The One Piece manga has way better pacing than the anime. Oh my god, dude. I've It's kind of outstanding how quickly I can read through One Piece versus watching it. And I think that's kind of what especially turned me off in the One Piece anime. And to quickly jump to another adaptation of One Piece is I want to bring up the live action because it kind of did get me interested in reading One Piece. The live action in Romance Dawn did something really, really well, and that's put in Nami in Romance Dawn, which immediately clicked a dynamic almost immediately. And even though Romance Dawn has a lot of pacing issues in the anime, it's still kind of visible in the manga. And the live action Romance Dawn does such a good job of making multiple elements of One Piece flow together so well. Now, this isn't a live action video, but it does. The live action also kind of has a problem merging too many storylines and sometimes having to cut out a few things here and there. But either way, after I finished Alabasta, I also read One Piece version 1, which was, I believe, Oda's first try at mapping out One Piece. I do find it kind of interesting how Oda wanted to make his story at first. He put a lot more emphasis on the idea of a good and a bad pirate, so much that they give them different names. And the Marines really aren't here to be shown. So it is kind of amusing. And I'm sure there's other things that he had to keep in mind, like pacing issues, right? Like I look at the version of One Piece that we got, and I bet it just went through a bunch of rings of editors. I'm sure his editors told Oda that you have to do this or you have to do that. And I think that's why you see Oda kind of always, you see him respect his editors a lot for that reason. Because even though Oda had a lot of ideas, his editors are the ones that kind of kept giving him creative food, kind of showing the value of a second opinion. All right, my closing thoughts is that yeah, the One Piece is good. Well, I don't know what else you want me to say. It's great. I really liked Romance Dawn. I thought Romance Dawn was even though it did have a little bit of that slow beginnings that I give that kind of plagues Oda from time to time. Its whimsy and passion alone should hook readers. And even though Romance Dawn has a lot of flaws, you won't really notice them until you are a massive One Piece nerd anyways. So if you enjoyed this arc and it was the thing that got you into the whole world of One Piece, I say it did its job with colors. That's all an opening really needs to do. I don't know what else I can say about this one volume that I read of One Piece, but especially with no actual script, I'm just doing this on little bulleted points. But I'm kind of checked out. I don't know how what else I can drag out of this this 8 chapter thing that I'm holding in my hand right now. So yeah, if you want me to cover Orange Town or Sarah Village or whatever, just let me know below or comment anything saying how bad my videos are or whatever. Kind of helps with the algorithm, I think. Anyways, I think that's gonna do it for me. So yeah, uh, thanks for stopping by, Mons, and don't get lost out there. Matane.